everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, which is the third and last in a series of webinars that we've been hosting in partnership with Broadridge about accelerating settlements. My name is Martin Lawrence. I'm from the ValueExchange, and I will be moderating today's session. The webinar series was originally drawn up as a way to facilitate meaningful information sharing and the way that we can all discuss how markets are adapting and preparing for accelerating settlement down to T+1. Hopefully, a number of you were able to join our previous webinars. We had one back in March this year where we were joined by Broadridge, as well as Emma Johnson and Mark Austin, while Emma was at JP Morgan. And during that webinar, we really looked at the differences in transitioning to T+1 in the EU and UK versus what happened in North America. The fact that while there were lots of lessons that could be learned from the North American transition, that is certainly not just a copy-paste exercise. There are lots of differences. Then moving forward to June, we hosted the second webinar. And again, we had Ignatius from Broadridge along with Danny Green. And we were very fortunate to be joined by Andrew Douglas, as well as Giovanni Sabatini. And we really then dived deeper into the nuances of T+1 in the UK and in the EU to really look through what the overall plans were for the move, start thinking about how the industry could prepare. During this webinar, the last one, we wanted to do something a little bit different. So rather than us go away and think of a theme to talk to you about during the webinar, what we wanted to do really is make it more about you, to try and talk about the questions that are burning for you, what's on top of your mind, and what can help you in your preparation for moving to T+1. So this is really a Q&A webinar. Now, I'm very lucky that we've been sent a lot of questions, so some of which I've had to combine up, but we're going to try and get through as many of them as we can today. If you do have any further questions that you want to ask, you'll see a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Just pop your question there. We'll do our best to get to it. Any that we can't get to, we'll try and respond to afterwards via email. I'm very lucky today to be joined by Carl Bennett, Ignatius John, and Emma Johnson. Before I get them to give a quick intro, I also just want to let you know that there will be a couple of poll questions today. I think 4 in total. So please do share your responses to them. It gives us a good idea of, again, where you are in your own preparation and what might be important to you, and will allow us to discuss a little bit about the responses to those polls. So I think that's all the housekeeping from me. So maybe let's start with a quick round of intros. Carl, you're top of my screen, so maybe we'll start with you, Carl.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Martin. Thanks for the intros, and excited to be with you all today to talk about this exciting yet challenging industry initiative, which is T+1, building on the success from the US T+1. My name is Carl Bennett. I'm a senior director at Broadridge Consulting Services based in the UK. I've been with Broadridge since 2022. My background's in capital markets transformation. I've worked predominantly on the sell side with top tier investment banks, helping them deliver change really at the intersection between data, technology, and middle back office operations. And as you can imagine, I've been engaged over the past couple of years with lots of conversations around T+1, first of all, helping prepare firms for US, and then more recently with Europe and UK. I think the work that we've been doing with clients has been a full spectrum. We've been looking at T+1 assessments, looking at firms' target operating models, helping them understand where the risks lie with their T+1 profile, looking across trading lines and functions, and helping them understand where they can get the best bang for their buck in terms of their T+1 program. But also partnering with firms doing project management, program management for T+1 to deliver a set of discrete items to upgrade their capabilities in preparation for T+1. So kind of the full spectrum of activities, and I hope that some of the insights that I can share with you today, having been engaged there, will be useful for those listening.
Thank you, Carl. And over to Ignatius. Quick introduction, please.
Yeah, hello everyone. I'm Ignatius. My background, I spent most of my career, 22 years, with a quant asset management shop in California. They were the quant division of AXA Investment Managers based out of London, and the company was called AXA Rosenberg. I was the global head of trading strategy there. And in 2010, I left. In 2012, I started a company called Alpha Omega, primarily focusing on building a fixed-based post-trade matching solution with a goal of providing T0 matching and settlement. So that was the primary reason I started the company. And then in 2021, it got acquired by Broadridge, and now I'm part of Broadridge. That's my quick background.
Thank you, Ignatius. And lastly, but not leastly, Emma.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Emma Johnson, now working for the ValueExchange, where I head up industry advocacy and insights. So what does that really mean? It means that I get to talk about T+1, my favourite topic, pretty much every day. And it kind of supports my role in the industry, where I co-lead the settlements work stream for the EU T1 Industry Committee. And from the UK Accelerated Settlement Task Force, I was formerly co-lead of the Lessons Learned from the US work stream. And now I'm co-leading the risk and compliance work stream for the UK, which will get going next year. So great to be asked to join this afternoon to talk about this fine topic.
Great, thank you, guys. So as everyone can see, we have a lot of experience here. So hopefully they're very well placed to be able to answer your questions. I have tried to order all the questions up a little bit, so we have some form of a flow as we go through this. In the first section we're going to go to is kind of industry readiness. But before that, I just wanted to get a view. So Will, if you could just put the first pulse question up. I just wanted to get a view from everyone around kind of where you are on your readiness journey today, how confident you are that you're going to be ready for a T1 environment in the UK, in Europe. Some of those deadlines are fast approaching, and they will have some going live towards the end of next year. So it doesn't give us a huge amount of time. So hopefully most of you are moving towards the very confident lens. Just to kind of give a view of what it looked like last time we did this. Last time we did this, we had, I think 26% of firms said that they were very confident. 66% of firms said that they were somewhat confident. 6% of firms said not confident. And 2% of firms said that we haven't started doing any preparation yet. So hopefully we don't see any there. Maybe, Will, if you could move us through so we can see the results. Okay, so we have a slightly higher percentage of firms who aren't preparing. So let's not concentrate on the negatives. So let's start thinking about the positives. We've now got almost 50% of you who are very confident. So I think that's really a good thing. Carl, I don't know if you had any comments to that.
Yeah, I think it's kind of what I expected, really, and what I'm seeing with conversations with firms. I think that when you think about the status of your T+1 program, really, I think you can think about three different areas. The first area is the area that is known, those items that are known. I think, generally speaking, the direction of travel, certainly at a policy level with EU and UK today, is pretty well known. It's been out there for a long time. Firms have interpreted that and kind of come up with those big ticket key items that they need to deliver in 2026. Seeing a lot of firms, thinking about real-time liquidity management capabilities, position management capabilities, standardizing and centralizing and automating SI processes. Those kind of key items, I think firms are quite confident in delivering in 2026. There's a second bucket, I would say, that is maybe evolving, less well known. Maybe the prioritization is unknown to clients today. Maybe they're waiting for a little bit more regulatory direction, or maybe they're waiting to understand what technology will best fit and best answer the regulatory requirements. So on the buy side, there's a direction and a encouragement for firms to use machine readable formats for allocations, but ESMA has kind of stopped at prescribing ISO 20022. So to what extent will ISO 20022 will be required alongside T+1? There's still questions around CSDR penalty regimes, about grace periods and buy-in regimes. So there's a lot in this category that firms are still making sense of and waiting to make decisions on. And then there's a third category really, which are kind of those items that are hidden from view. I think until firms carry out rigorous end-to-end operational readiness testing, they will be unable to kind of uncover those items. So I think this response doesn't surprise me. But what I would say is that maybe there is a little bit with certain firms of complacency in the industry because they don't yet fully understand what their T+1 risk profile is. And until they do that end-to-end readiness testing, they're kind of unable to uncover and get that full comprehensive view of requirements.
Thanks, Carl. Yeah,
Martin, can I just add a little bit to this whole question that you have put up over here?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I'm just comparing this to what happened in North America in August, September of 2023. So that's 9 months before North America went T+1. Survey was done, and I would say, I think it was 52% basically said that they know that it's going to go to T+1, but have done nothing. So this is very encouraging to see what's happening in UK, EU. I'm very pleased to see this kind of result. Just my little 2 cents into this poll.
In full agreement with you there, Ignatius, although part of me still does want to poke the 6% that haven't yet made a start. The AST obviously put out their plan or roadmap in Q1 this year. The EU Industry Committee did so in June, I think. And so, Emma, I guess coming to you, as I said, the AST, the Industry Committee, the EU Industry Committee have put out their plans. They did that, in Q1 and Q2. What have they been up to over the last few months, and what can we expect to see from them next with regards to kind of market-facing publications, etc.?
Yeah, thanks, Martin. And I think it's a really good question. I think it's just, sometimes we need like a level set, don't we? And just to look back and see how far we've come to give us confidence to move forward. So, I'm also encouraged by those survey results. And again, the 6% haven't started, that you need to get going. So from a UK point of view, I think, on the UK side, I think the code of conduct was really, really well socialised. It was developed in 2024. It was a draft was circulated. There was a public consultation. People, firms had a chance to digest it before the final draft dropped on the 6th of Feb. Since that time, I think, we've kind of moved our mindset into implementation. We've kind of stopped talking about it and pontificating, and we've actually taken those requirements in-house into every single firm, whatever walk of life, and just think, what does this look like in practice? And firms sort of had a chance to kind of lock down planning, arrange budgets, because it's super important to kind of get the budgets locked down. And firms should now really be, in that mindset now of, focus it on those milestones coming up super quickly, the FMSB SSI standards for sharing and storage of SSIs, exchange of SSIs, allocation and confirmations on trade dates, and the automation of stock loan recalls, which are coming at the end of 26 for the UK. So that should now be front and centre. And this is where the UK is really kind of, upping the ante in terms of strong communication planning. The eagle-eyed, on this webinar will note that the AST has a very active website and social media platform. So a lot of regular posts coming out, blogs and webinars and so on. And also now looking at an FAQ, which will obviously be dynamic and updated in real time. So I think there's been strong preparation and engagement for the UK side. And what the UK's been good at, I think they've been a good neighbour, really partnering and engaging, especially with the EU, with Giovanni Sabatini's industry committee. He joins our calls. We are, really aligned together alongside the Swiss market as well. So I think what we're trying to sort of show is a common party line across geographic Europe, that actually we are all aligned and working together for October 2027. And this is super important for firms outside of the European region. it's having that common, that common front for, firms across APAC and North America who may be unaware of some of the intricacies and how we are structured here in Europe. So yeah, I think we're in a good place.
Thanks, Emma. I always think the part you mentioned there about kind of budgets is really the most important thing for me in some respects when it comes to the planning, because I kind of think about, end of next year and then October 2027 and how many budget cycles do I have to get through? Because if I'm planning to do significant platform changes to support something and I'm one of the 6% who hasn't started doing any planning yet, chances are I'm not going to make it to that point. And then we start to look at, okay, well, what were the negative parts of the North American move to T+1? Cost, because we didn't automate early enough, we didn't budget early enough, and we ended up having to throw people at the problem. So I think that would be interesting. So it'd be really good to start seeing, as you talk about, more information coming through from AST, from the EU Industry Committee, so people really understand fully what is expected and how they're expected to do it. Ignatius, just on some of the operational challenges of T1, there's obviously lots of differences between North America and the operating models, differences between the EU and the UK. Do you see any big remaining gaps there in that firms need to think about closing?
So just, I was in UK and Europe in September, and just talking to asset management. My focus has been mainly on the asset management side, and just talking to them, what I found out was that many of these asset managers, they believe that they do have the level of automation that they need, but once you dig deeper and look under the cover, you realize that they've built multiple silos within the post-trade process, and these silos don't typically talk to each other. So it's typically a file that is moved from one silo to the other silo to continue the process downstream. And I think that's a gap that I see. My mantra has always been automation and complete STP, that's straight through processing. And that is going to help out a lot, not just T+1, but also going to T0. Because the way I look at this is that let's plan on T0 and T1 just falls into place. And so that's one of the big things I see. Many of the asset managers, especially the larger ones, are the ones who have a lot of these silos built in. It works right now, but once you reduce the settlement cycle, those are cracks that might just give way. And that's how I see that process right now, that they need to pay more attention to that the process going downstream from trading all the way to settlement.
Thanks, Ignatius. And then I guess, Carl, from your perspective, again, just from the clients you speak to, and you gave a bit of a review earlier on the 3 different buckets when we had the poll question up, but just with regards to general industry preparedness, do you see any kind of gaps forming anywhere with regards to maybe different client profile types, regions, etc.?
I think there's different types of challenges. Certainly, one challenge that's widely cited is with Asian investors, right? There's a lot more challenge and pressure there. You need to think about potentially pre-funding for particular instruments if investing in equities and bonds. But I think overall, I think generally speaking, I go back to the point I made before, right? Until you draw up that kind of comprehensive risk profile on all of your trading lines and functions, it's difficult to make kind of well-informed decisions around where budget should be spent on the T+1 side. I think, and lessons learned from the US, I think the earlier that firms could start that operational readiness testing to get a full appreciation end to end where the risk lies, the better prepared they were, going back to your point you made before around where they should be looking to spend funding. Yeah,
and I guess actually, because you kind of just talked into it and kind of moving into testing and market preparedness was kind of like the next stage along and where we were planning to go with today's questions. So with that, and I'll probably just stay with you, Carl, but with regards to testing, should firms try and test with all of their counterparties, or should they just rely on testing through their custodian or CSD readiness? Like, what would you say is kind of the approach that should be taken?
I think the simple answer to that is that you can't rely on your custodians. I mean, there's functions matching allocations that, quite frankly, are outside of your custodian's direct purview and control. So, you are going to need a client outreach program and to include all of your counterparties and clients in testing. That said, do be pragmatic in the way that you approach that. Start with your higher volume clients. Lower volume, you may be able to approach in a kind of more aggregated fashion. If you are trusting in custodians, for example, to pick up certain functions, then be explicit in how you communicate that with custodians. Make it clear that you're expecting them to fill in certain gaps. Generally speaking, I think it helps to work with partners such as Broadridge that have mature, comprehensive test strategies and frameworks that can partner with you and help accelerate your testing journey for T+1. Partners that have kind of existing test scripts that can be adapted for your exact T+1 requirements. Leverage us to take those standardized scripts and adapt them instead of building them from the ground up. We're spending a lot of time speaking to clients, interpreting regulatory requirements and building those test scripts, and leverage us and leverage the cost mutualization that you get from a consultancy like Broadridge.
Thanks, Carl. And Emma, just back to you, I guess, from the industry perspective, and again, the kind of the committee's perspective. Like, what kind of plans do they have for testing? And again, I guess, as well as the committees, but from the kind of the FMI perspective, like what testing is being planned, especially considering all of the different dates and obligations we have.
Of course, and I think like to me, Carl said the magic word partner, and I think we're going to see lots of partnerships here. So from a UK point of view, the AST has launched a new testing work stream with two truly excellent and experienced leaders, Alex Chow from JP Morgan and Charlie Pugh from Euroclear UK and International. And I think having the industry partnering with an FMI, that has to be, for the end-to-end, it's essential. And then what is also essential is kind of joining the dots across, the three jurisdictions moving in October 27. So the EU Industry Committee has launched its own testing task force as well, just to devise a common industry methodology, absolutely with a goal to align and collaborate with the UK and also the Swiss task force as well. So I think they're targeting end of Q1 26 to pull together the testing scenarios. The EU's task force is also being co-led by Alex Chow from JP, and Charlie Pugh's been switched out for Ivan Nikora from Euroclear Bank. So again, that joined up kind of relationship between FMI and industry. So I think the end-to-end testing across the investment lifecycle, all the various different provider and consumer relationships, I think that's a given. Like devising those test cases, devising what does good look like, super important. But I think what is also really important, and I don't think gets nowhere near enough airtime, is what lies beneath. And this is where I think there is a lot to be kind of learned from the US. And I think DTCC in particular, they had a rigorous testing schedule behind the scenes that really championed resiliency. It kind of looked at the throughput of the concentration of instructions, being sent in a small time frame post end of trading and pre the start of settlements. And let's be clear, like from an EU point of view, settlement is starting pretty much on trade date for some of the CSDs. So I think working on those test cases about the pipe and capacity is going to be really important, in addition to preparing for worst day scenarios where there's an outage and what that means over the migration weekend. So yeah, lots to work on there.
Thanks, Emma. And Ignatius, I know Emma kind of just talked a little bit there about some of what the likes of DTCC did from a testing plan perspective, but sorry to pick on you because you're in the North American market yourself. But from the buy-side clients you work with quite regularly, were there any specific lessons that were learned there around testing that you think would be useful to kind of pass on to people here, maybe in the UK and Europe?
No, that's absolutely a good question. I totally agree with what Carl and Emma have said about the end-to-end testing. But let me just tell you a little bit more from the end-to-end testing. When we did this, so we have a UAT environment that we have set up where any client can send trades for matching and then for settlement through our platform. And one of the things that the clients came back and said was that I still don't know if my trades have been settled or not. So to do that, they have to go to the custodian banks, their portals. And so if they've got 5 custodian banks, the next day on T1 is when they realize, oh, this did not go through. I've got to fix this, which became a pain for them. And they said that, is there any way that this information can be pushed back from the custodian banks into a single platform? And they're not having to log into 5 different custodian banks portals. So what we have done is that we've actually pulled the SWIFT messages, the MT548 messages, back into our platform to give them the status of each settlement instruction that has been sent out. So everything is right there for them. And these are the kind of things that really help the industry move to a shorter settlement cycle, because you're now bringing all the information to one place and helping them out. And so that's something which will be available to EU and to the UK process, which is what we believe is, at the end of the day, I'm not just talking about the product that Broadridge is offering, but I'm just talking about the process itself. At the end of the day, the process needs to be tight, and STP truly needs to flow between the 2 parties or the partners. Like as Emma and Carl said, it's a partnership. So you really need to partner with the custodian bank, so they are also relieved that the information has flown back to the asset managers, so they know exactly what the issues are, if there are.
And that's going to be, Ignatius, just one thing to say on that as well, that's going to be invaluable when you talk about the fragmentation that exists in the European market. Correct. Right? You're talking about 40 CSDs, 50 CCPs. That coordination is going to be invaluable.
Yeah. So we can't really compare that way. Based on what Carl just said, we can't compare the North American or the US market to Europe. Europe is far more complicated. There are too many moving pieces. There are about 37 clearing houses there, and there are a whole bunch of CCPs. And then there are different time zones. Whereas in the US, there are different time zones, but everything is based on the Eastern time, right? I mean, when the New York market closes, and that's it. It's at 4 p.m. Eastern time, everything, then the post-trade process starts there. And of course, each country has their own little nuances and their regulations. So there are a lot more moving pieces in Europe. It's much more complicated.
Certainly are, yeah. And Emma, just coming to you quickly, there's a question that just came in, and it's linked to testing, so maybe we'll just ask it now. But someone's asking whether or not there'll be any regular results or readiness status being published once testing phase starts. I know I was chatting with Andrew Douglas last week, and one of the things he was promoting was having names of firms listed on maybe the AST website that are ready to settle T0. I think it's an interesting way of doing it, but I think his view was that everyone would want to be on that list, right? So it's going to encourage people to get ready early, to promote themselves to being ready to support T0. But do you know if there's any other kind of published information going to be released?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think in terms of published information, beyond Andrew's beauty parade of firms who are declaring themselves ready, I kind of always go back to kind of what does good look like. And I think you could be ready in your own institutional mind that you are fine and everything works, but actually you can only prove that you're ready when your partners, your clients, your counterparts, your providers are ready as well. So I think I'm a little bit skeptical on that. But beyond that, I mean, there's been a commitment from UK and International to publish settlement efficiency rates and matching rates. So I think that's going to be kind of like a bit of a temperature check, like we saw with the US and the affirmation stats that DTCC published. And it's when they started to publish those stats that really it piqued interest, and you started to kind of see kind of a rapid improvement in those statistics. So I think that's something that we need to work on. But these are super new work streams that are really just at the moment just in the infancy and kind of describing what the user cases are. And I think there will be KPIs and metrics, absolutely. There'll be kind of scorecards, I'm sure, at an institutional level, but I think that's probably more for Q1 next year to really kind of anchor down on what the socialization of testing and readiness looks like.
Thanks, Emma. We're going to move on to more kind of settlement and operational based questions next. But before we do, Will, could you just put up the second poll question? We want to have a little look at what are some of the biggest challenges that you're all expecting with regards to the transition. We probably should have had an option here, thinking about it, of all of the above. But operational complexity is clearly going to be a challenge. Ignatius was just talking about just the fragmentation in Europe, multiple markets. Pre-trade readiness, I think if I recall correctly, when we talked about, what were the key factors in ensuring a successful migration in North America, and the biggest thing came back as affirmations. I think getting all that T0 processing done quickly. Increased risk of settlement fails. Again, we can talk about this in a bit, but big differences between the North American market and the UK and Europe with regards to the treatment of settlement fails with CSDR penalties, etc. FX funding cut-offs that we've talked about. Managing external dependencies, kind of links in with the testing a little bit as well, and then kind of tech and investment system readiness. So, Will, when you're ready, if you can maybe just push forward the results of those, and we can quickly see what we're looking like. So pretty broad. Number one challenge coming back is operational complexity, but FX and funding cutoffs not too far behind. Maybe Ignatius, just first, if you wanted to just kind of give a view you might have on the response that you see there.
Yep. So of course, one of the big things is the getting involved with the funding. That is something which every asset manager in the US who's investing globally had to deal with, because Europe and Asia were still on T2 while they had moved into T1. So they were complaining about that quite a bit, because the markets were not aligned. And so the only way that they could move forward was that do a trade. Say if they wanted to sell something in Europe, to use those funds to buy something in the US, they either had to do that transaction one day ahead, or they did it on the same day, and then they just paid an overdraft to the custodian banks for that one day, which of course starts eating into the alpha. But they had no other way to bridge that gap. And so that was one big issue and complaint, especially when we had a postmortem of the T+1. This was for October of 2024. There were people complaining about the different market time settlement times. Mm-hmm. The other piece is I see that there's also the SSI readiness. When I was on the trading desk, 80 to 90% of our breaks, once we went for settlement, were because of SSI issues. And that causes a lot of pain, because now it's not only just us and the asset manager and the broker, you've also pulled in the custodian bank or the prime broker, and all three of us are trying to figure out what's actually gone wrong. So getting the SSIs is very critical, getting the SSIs correct. And
yeah, agreed. Also, I think we talk a lot about post-trade, all those T0 requirements, but yes, less about pre-trade and making sure all of our onboarding, account setup, exercise, etc., are managed correctly. But Carl, just going into settlement fails. Obviously, I mentioned kind of briefly that the profile of settlement fails in UK and Europe are different to the US. Maybe if you could just talk a little bit about what some of those differences are, and also how firms can kind of prepare to manage that risk.
Yeah, I think it may be a little bit too early on the settlement fail side to understand or predict accurately the kind of a change in profile on settlement fails. One thing I'd say on the risk side of things, though, is that it's widely cited that really why are we endeavoring on a T+1 accelerated settlement cycle? Really, firms are looking to reduce the counterparty credit risk, reduce systemic risk, and increase operational efficiencies. But at the same time, there's a recognition that the operational and technology risk intraday, certainly in the short term, is going to be impacted. There might be kind of a simple formula that firms can do to say, who are the winners going to be in this T+1 initiative. I think the winners are those quite simply that can mitigate the operational and technology risk, right? That's going to come as a result of T+1 in the short and medium term. and then reap the benefits of counterparty credit risk and operational efficiencies. How can they mitigate operational risk? Well, firms might need to start thinking about moving beyond kind of annual and manual RCSAs. I'm not saying RCSAs are not important; they're extremely important, but they might need to start thinking about a risk and control framework that's more dynamic, a living system that's continuous, that can evolve and adapt. That uses automation like preventative and detective mechanisms to identify control gaps, to use risks and incidents, and then learn from those and adapt from those and adapt the control and risk system more dynamically. And on the technology risk side, we've spoken a little bit around functional risk and functional areas, but on the technology side, firms should be rationalizing as well around disaster recovery, right? What that means in an accelerated settlement cycle, what that means in a T1 cycle. They may have SLAs with technology providers of an hour. So if their system goes down, it can be recovered within an hour. Is that going to be acceptable in a T+1 environment where they have a matter of hours to process late trades? So as well as the functional side of things, firms might like to think around rationalizing their technology, disaster recovery plans, and having high availability technology throughout their stack.
Thanks, Carl. And then on kind of settlement risk as well, so Ignatius, I'll come to you for this one if that's okay. But obviously in the T1 environment, we have a lot less time to manage exceptions and to fix errors. So maybe just talk a little bit about some of the roles that automation can play there. And maybe even looking forward, do we need to think about things more like predictive analytics as opposed to just relying on what's happening from a post perspective?
Yeah, and that's a good point, Martin. The settlement risk, as long as every asset manager or every broker wants to know if this trade is going to get settled or not, even before they push it through settlement. And that is really the key piece. And how can they know that? Just to make sure that everything will go through smoothly is only if the data is correct, it's validated, and it's pushed properly through the system, and it's goes for settlement. I'll give you an example, like the predictive piece that you were talking about. We've got the miscellaneous fees. As an asset manager, we were not totally on top of all the miscellaneous fees in the different exchanges and different markets. So I'm just giving you an example of Taiwan. We didn't have it right. The broker alerted us with that, saying that, look, this is obsolete. The exchange fee is changed, and so it's a different amount. And so we fixed it. If it wasn't been alerted, which is basically the predictive part of it, we would have gone to settlement and it would have broken because the net money was not right. And those are kind of places where I believe a lot of this predictive AI and places like that could play a key role. The only issue is that we need to get that data on real time. So anytime that's been updated, I'm just giving specifically for miscellaneous fees. And there are a lot of other areas that they could have those happening. And right now we are working on those kind of components. So to make sure that we get the data, and Broadridge has got a huge wide network of access to all these places. And so we are just piggybacking off of that to get the information into our platform.
Well, one quick point on that, Martin. Good point, Ignatius, and exactly kind of building on that. One thing that Broadridge has out there, one tool is the Fells prediction engine, which will be particularly useful for T+1, where I think T+1 is ushering in this new way of thinking around prioritization of operational work throughout a day. Trying to direct workers to those high risk areas. So the Broadridge Fells prediction engine actually looks at the trade economics of a particular trade and then can calculate the probability that trade may fail. That's useful to kind of directing workers towards particularly high risk areas. We're doing something similar on the corporate action side as well. Taking in, as Ignatius said, market data, taking in particular dates, ex-date, record date, buyer protection periods, also considering your kind of behavioral data, behavioral patterns and team capacity planning. And then looking at corporate action events, life cycle events, and again, looking at the risk profile against those different corporate action events and trying to predict direct workers towards those particularly high risk areas that need attention.
Yeah, thanks, Carl. It's so important these days to be able to focus your energies on the high risk items in these environments where we just have less time. Emma, I just want to ask you a question. When the North American market moved, the biggest question I seemed to get was, what's an affirmation? For people that are outside of Europe and the UK, I think it's turning into a little bit of what's the importance of PSET, PSAFE. Maybe you could just do a bit of an explanation on exactly what's required there and the reason why and how it's going to help with settlement efficiency.
Yeah, and I think that is a good question. I think, the affirmation, I think we're still kind of recovering from that, having to educate ourselves on actually what it was. And I think PSET and PSAFE are fast becoming the thorn in our sides here in Europe. So PSET. So I'm going to focus really on the EU here. And the reason I do that is because ESMA obviously published their regulatory technical standards, the draft regulatory technical standards last month, and PSET features. So PSET, in the context of T+1, and the context of CSDR, RTS, is a requirement to be populated in the allocation. So actually, this isn't new. It's a requirement to populate the PSET today under CSDR level 2. But ESMA are taking a harder line by requiring it to be used in the allocation and confirmation stage. Why is that so key? It's so key because we work in silos in this industry. You've got, post-trade pre-settlement going about their business, allocation confirmation, and you've got settlement CSD level matching going about their business. You need to join them together. And PSET is the kind of the way to do that, having that kind of seamless flow, agreeing upfront the place of settlement, which of course in Europe, with 31 CSDs and numerous cross-border permutations is vital to aid that process. So that's level 2. We have to do that here in the EU, and it's something that the FCA have kind of backed the AST's position. For the similar requirement in the UK. But how do you know as an asset manager where your securities are held to be able to allocate? That's a PSAFE. And this is where the custodians play a critical role by reporting to their clients where their holdings are located so they can accurately allocate, including the PSET. So that's probably a little bit of the mystique in a whistle-stop tour of two very technical fields and technical topics. Hopefully that helps.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Emma.
Martin, can I just add a little bit more to what Emma just said?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So the PSET and the PSAF, as she said, as Emma said, it's going to be a mandatory field passed through on the allocations. Currently, many of the order management systems that send that information through do not have that as a mandatory field. And so we have actually reached out to many of these OMSs, knowing very well what is coming up for UK and EU, to put that in there, the PSET and the PSAF. And the other key piece is that we need to make sure that information gets passed through to the custodian banks in the messages that the settlement instructions that are getting sent through. Currently, they don't. And so we have now tested, we're actually right now testing with many of the large custodian banks to make sure that information is embedded into the SWIFT message and we are sending it through, including with the prime brokers.
Just to add to that as well, Ignatius, and another consideration there is we go back to the profile of settlement fails we spoke about before. I think there was some data published by ESMA back in 2024 that spoke about ETFs, exchange traded funds. Significant disparity in settlement fails across asset classes, ETFs being 20% plus. When you consider that against sovereign bonds, it's kind of 1-2%, right? And I think this is linked quite closely to the PSET that we're talking about now. ETFs being listed typically on ICSDs like Euroclear, but actually traded on domestic trading venues, national CSDs like Iberclear or Euronext Paris. You typically see that fragmentation and that ambiguity around PSETs, and then that is typically driving those high percentage settlement failures that we see on the ETF side. So hopefully the clarity that we've now got, I think, from ESMA regarding the P-set value will go some way to kind of driving a reduction in the settlement failures on the ETF side, I suppose, is my point.
And I think also greater use of cross-border settlement. I think we kind of stay in our lane when actually there's so many CSD links in place that you can have that seamless cross-border settlement, and that really lends to the ETFs. That's a great point, Carl.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, or anything multi-listed, right? Yeah, but yeah.
Thank you. I think on that, we're going to ask the audience again what their opinion is on what creates the greatest settlement risk. So, well, if you could just push the third question forward. Some of these items we've already talked about a little bit. The importance of allocations and confirmations being done on time and accurately. Talked a little bit about funding and FX flows. Obviously, just talked about cross-border. Haven't really had much of a conversation yet about securities lending and recall, but obviously that's a significant aspect to consider in moving to a T1 settlement regime, and something we did see was very impactful on the North American side. Correct. And then this kind of real-time visibility kind of across counterparties. So, well, if we can just cut it there and take a little look to see what people have selected. Wow, a really broad mix, but definitely a lack of real-time visibility across counterparties is coming up at number one. Carl, I'll probably let you give your comments on that. First thought, anything jump out at you?
Yeah, slightly surprised at the result on, I suppose, funding and FX flows. I think that's a widely cited problem and issue that needs to be tackled within the industry. Certainly on the CLS side, having that midnight cutoff currently for PVP instructions to allow the multilateral netting overnight, for that to happen on the T+1 morning is kind of like a widely cited problem. I think if that midnight cutoff is missed for FX flows, then you get into having to instruct bilateral FX trades, and then that kind of adds more risk to your equity transaction settlement, right? So, and then you add into that, I think on the FX side, complications around, many are indirectly accessing CLS via correspondent banks, and you add in, possibly non-CLS currencies as well, like Polish, Romanian, Czech, that are going to need, non-PVP mechanisms for accessing those currencies. There's a lot of a challenge. It seems there's a big challenge there around FX and funding. So it surprises me that's so low. Don't know everyone else's thoughts.
I think actually when we did this for North America, it was kind of similar. Like it was only as we got closer to the actual transition that people realized what a big problem SEC lending and funding was. I think initially people look at this as a settlement issue, right, primarily, and they concentrate their efforts there. So I wonder if we did this again in 6 months' time, if that might change. But I know we don't have too much longer, so I don't want to spend any more time talking about that. I want to talk about technology for a little bit. And maybe Ignatius, I'll start with you. But obviously there's lots of technologies out there now, between going full board of replacing your legacy platform, all the way through just to technologies that kind of bridge the gap between legacy and new modern platforms. But what would you say are the kind of most important technologies in removing these manual touch points and helping people to get to kind of less to a greater efficiency and support T+1?
That's a good point, Martin. The technologies, the way I look at that is that really we need to standardize on the communication between, there should be some kind of a global platform. Just like, for example, you take the trading side, right? Everything is done by FIX. And everything is standardized on that, and so you can send information back and forth. It could be you could be trading in Timbuktu. You just send a fixed message to a broker in Timbuktu, and he would settle that or execute that for you, right? Just like that, I believe that there has to be some kind of a common place on the post-trade place. Settlement, yes, there is a SWIFT instructions that are getting sent, which has always been there. But in between the post-trade, I'm talking about the middle office piece, there's a lot of gap over there. And that's something that we need to hone in and say, okay, look, guys, this is really how I want. Each vendor cannot create their own format, right? Saying, hey, I want it this way. These are my specs. Send it to me this way. It is just going to create nothing but chaos going downstream. And I think that's one of the big things that the two groups, Giovanni and Douglas, Andrew's group are emphasizing on. And I very strongly feel about that. My background, of course, I'm a computer science graduate, so obviously I'm very hot on technology, but I've gone into the business side, onto the trading side. But I married the two together, and I realized that technology is the key foundation to have this thing all work right. So that's how I look at the technology piece, and that will bring in the automation. And one of the big risks that in the poll question, the third poll question, was the visibility. That goes back to transparency, or STP, that I was talking about. Everybody wants to know. I want to know right now where my process is. What is the status? And that's critical. Every second counts, especially when you're shortening the cycle. And so that is where technology plays a key role.
Thanks, Ignatius.
Can I just add something on that as well?
Yeah, absolutely, Emma. No, go ahead.
I think, like, from an automation point of view, it's like, what are you automating? Are you automating bad data to get bad outcomes, or are you automating good data to get good outcomes? And this is where I think we need to fix the core and get the data standards and harmonization right to be able to then achieve that automation with absolute clarity and certainty, I think. So fix the core would be like my addition to that.
Thanks, Emma. And Carl, from the conversations you're having with your kind of client base, are you seeing firms primarily building capabilities to support T1 on their legacy platforms, or really do you think they're starting to use it as a catalyst for more fundamental change?
Most clients, I think, are using a hybrid strategy. I think there are certain areas, there's no one size fits all, but there are certain areas where you can make adaptations to existing core platforms. There are others where particular use cases are opening themselves up around DLT, for example. So firms are selectively investing in new technologies for particular use cases. There's ways of doing this, bridging the gap between old and new. So on the DLT side, you see a lot of firms, our digital ledger repo platform is processing now over $7 trillion in monthly volume, right? You're seeing a lot of firms using existing settlement and payment rails, but at the same time using that digital ledger over the top of those legacy settlement and payment rails to give them enhanced visibility, faster matching, etc. So you can use technologies like DLT to get kind of better visibility and traceability from a books and records perspective, whilst at the same time having it overlaid, and the industry is not quite there in terms of getting to that utopia state, atomic settlement across the industry. So it's important to kind of selectively invest in these particular use cases, but the use cases are there, and our clients are making use of that, right?
Yeah, Carl, I think that's a really great point. I always think there's kind of two ways you can look at a major change like this, or any regulatory change, right? You can either look at it as a view to, it's like a compliance exercise and it's tick a box, I need to get there, or I can change my processes to create a better solution for my clients, potentially increase my wallet share, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So hopefully, we all have time to get this right for the end of 2027, and hopefully for most firms will take the latter approach and look to create solutions that differentiate their service. I'm conscious we only have a few minutes left, so I'm just going to ask a couple more questions. Ignatius, probably stick to a 1 minute answer if you can, but a lot of people did ask about, do we see a move to T0 in certain markets, and what would we need to get there? Probably don't have long to answer it, but do you see it happening anytime soon, and what do you think needs to change to get there?
Martin, certainly it's not going to happen in my tenure while I'm going to be working at Broadridge, because sooner or later I'm going to move on and retire. But I think it could happen in the next 3 to 5 years. If you notice, there are some markets already on T0. In India, of course, it's only a certain number of stocks, and also in China. and the industry is going to keep chugging along. But mind you, it's just not post-trade that is going to be what needs to be revamped. T0 is something that it's all the way through. When I was on the trading desk, we were trading, everything was at the speed of light. We were co-locating our servers in the exchanges, so we didn't want to spend the time between the data moving from the asset manager's shop to the exchanges. And then suddenly you come to a grinding halt, you hit a wall right after the trading is completed. So there's a lot that needs to be done after trading through settlement. And so to achieve T0, a lot of that has to be revamped. For example, we talked about securities lending. That was shown us a little bit of risk over there, but in the US, that was a big issue. A broker, the lender could actually recall the stock on T+1 till 3 p.m. And that if they do that, you've just got 1 hour to go find a stock. Otherwise, your trade gets busted, and which means you are not doing well in the market. So those are kind of things that have to be reassigned by the regulators and said, this is how it's going to work.
Thanks, Ignatius.
A lot of regulations have to change. Sorry, I took a lot more than 1 minute, but
that's okay. I set you a pretty impossible task. Yeah. Well, could you just do the last poll question? I just want to see what people's view is here on what will be the most important next step for your firms ahead of the move. We've talked about most of these things today, so it's just really interesting to see kind of what you're concentrating on and whether or not it's about kind of testing, automation, aligning effective funding processes, or strengthening intraday liquidity management. We didn't really get a chance to talk about fund dealing and the IA's recommendation to reduce the fund dealing cycles down to T+2 and closer to the alignment of the securities settling within the funds. But these are all really important steps. So maybe if you could just show the responses to them. And so, post-trade systems and automation, probably not hugely surprising, probably a very good story for Carl and Ignatius at Broadridge. Carl, I'm going to give you the honor of having the final comment here before we wrap up. So maybe just a view on that. And then if you had like 30 seconds for people to take away as what's the one thing you would start with if you were at a firm thinking about how to deal with T+1?
Yeah, I think we've said it before, but I think use partners and collaborate. We've spoken about, I think, about on the Broadridge side what we can offer in terms of helping collaborate with you and deliver a comprehensive test strategy and partner with you on testing. We can also, augment or help your project management or program management around T+1, or help you define a kind of target operating model. Another thing we may not have spoken about is, what happens post go live. We're expecting that there will be challenges. Your organization will be under stress and under certain demands that it's not under today. Broadridge also offers a staff augmentation service. So within the consulting division, you can also hit us up and request resources on demand. SMEs that can come into your organization and backfill certain operational functions to plug those gaps. So partner with us and reach out to us, and we're looking forward to hearing from you and understanding how we can help.
Thanks, Carl. And that is unfortunately all we have time for. And that also means it's the wrap up of the series. I'd like to thank Carl, Ignatius, and Emma for today. I'd like to thank Broadridge for kind of sponsoring this series. If any of you would like to watch any of the recordings, they are available on our website, vx.io. The first two are already there. The third one will be there in about a week's time. Really big thank you to everyone who's joined any one of these series, and I hope you all got something from it. And we look forward to speaking to you again soon. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Martin.
Thanks, all. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.